Usually 3 or 4 of the farmers joined in a little caravan and went in their wagons to Brookville twice a year. They would go in the spring with the hides of animals killed during the winter, that being the hunting season, and the hides then taken being of superior quality to those taken at any other time. Early in the fall they would go again to Brookville to market their summer crop of wheat. Mr. Fox and a few neighbors had returned from an early trip to market only a day or two before the children's party at Balzer's home, and had brought with them a few packages of a fine new drink called coffee. That is, it was new to the western settler at the time of which I write, milk sweetened with tree sugar being the usual table drink. Linny had brought over a small gourdful of coffee as a present to Mr. Brent, and a pot of brown beverage had been prepared for the supper under the elms. The Yates children and Tom were frank enough to admit the coffee was bitter and not fit to drink, but Linny had made it, and Balzer drank it, declaring it was very good indeed. Linny knew he told a story, but she thanked him for it nevertheless, and said that the Yates children and Tom were so thoroughly country and green that she couldn't expect them to like a civilized drink. This would have made trouble with Tom, and Balzer, who saw it coming, said, "Now shut up, Tom Fox," and Balzer had so recently whipped Tom that his word bore the weight of authority. Besides the coffee and the white bread, there was a great gourd full of milk with the cream mixed in, just from the spring house, delicious and cold. There was a cold loin of venison, which had been spitted and roasted over a bed of hot coals in the kitchen fireplace that morning. There was a gourd full of quail eggs, which had been boiled hard and cooled in the spring house. There were heaping plates of fried chicken and rolls of glorious yellow butter just from the churn, rich with the genuine butter taste that makes one long to eat it by the spoonful. Then there was a delicious apple pie, sweet and crusty, floating in cream, almost as thick as molasses in winter. They were backwoods, homely children, but the supper to which they sat down under the elms was fit for a king, and the appetite with which they ate it was too good for any king. During the supper the bear cubs had been nosing about the log table, begging each one by turns for a bite to eat. They were so troublesome that Jim got a long stick, and whenever they came within reach he gave them a sharp rap upon the head, and soon they waddled away in a pet of indignant disgust. For quite a while after Jim had driven them off, there had been a season of suspicious quietude on the part of the cubs. Suddenly a chorus of yelps, howls, growls, and whines came from the direction of the wolf pups. The attention of all at the table was, of course, at once attracted by the noise, and those who looked beheld probably the most comical battle ever fought. Tom and Jerry, with their everlasting desire to have their noses into everything that did not concern them, had gone to investigate the wolf pups, and in the course of investigation a fight ensued, whereby the wolves were liberated. The cubs were the stronger, but the wolves were more active, and thus the battle was quite even. The bears, being awkward, of course, were in each other's way most of the time, and would fall over themselves and roll upon the ground for a second or two before they could get upon their clumsy feet. The consequence was that the wolves soon had the best of the fight, and being once free from the cubs, scampered off to the woods and were never seen again. When the wolves had gone, the cubs turned round and round looking for their late antagonists, but failing to find them, sat down upon their haunches, grinned at each other in a very silly manner, and then began to growl and grumble in the worst bear language anyone ever heard. Balzer scolded the cubs roundly, and told them he taught them better than to swear, even in bear talk. He then switched them for having liberated the wolves, and went back to supper. The switching quieted the bears for a short time, but soon their spirit of mischief again asserted itself. After another period of suspicious silence on the part of the cubs, Jim put a general inquiry to the company. "What do you suppose they're up to this time?" "Goodness only knows," responded Balzer, "but if I hear another grunt out of them, I'll take the stick to them that'll hurt, and off they'll go to the pen for the night." The settlers frequently caught swarms of bees in the woods, and Balzer's father had several hives near the house. These hives were called gums because they were made from sections of a hollow gum tree, that being the best wood for the home of bees. These hollow gums were placed upon small slanting platforms, and were covered with clapboards, which were held tightly in their places by heavy stones. There was a small hole, perhaps as large as the end of your finger, cut in the wood at the base, through which the bees entered, and upon the inside of the hive they constructed their comb and stored their honey. I told you once before how bears delight to eat fish and blackberries. They are also very fond of honey. In fact, bears seem to have a general appetite and enjoy everything from boys to blackberries. Hardly had Balzer spoken this threat when another duet of howls and yelps reached his ears. "Now what on earth is it?" he asked, and immediately started around the house in the direction whence the howls had come. "Jiminy, I believe they've upset the bee gum," said Jim. "Don't you know they have?" asked Balzer, by the time the boys were in sight of the bears. "Well, I know now they have, if that suits you any better. Golly, look at them paw and scratch and rub their eyes when the bees sting. Good enough for you. Give it to 'em, bees." And Jim threw back his head and almost split his sides with laughter. Sure enough, the bears had got to nosing about the bee gums, and in their ever-hungry greediness had upset one. This, of course, made the bees very angry, and they attacked the cubs in a buzzing, stinging swarm that set them yelping, growling, snapping in a most desperate and comical manner. All their snapping and growling, however, did no good, for the bees continued to buzz and sting without any indication of being merciful. A little of this sort of thing went a long way with the black mischief-makers, and they soon ran to Balzer and Jim for help. The bees, of course, followed, and when the boys and girls saw the bees coming, they broke helter-skelter in all directions, and ran as fast as they could go. The bears then ran to the river and plunged in to escape their tormentors. When the gum had been placed in position again, the bees had become quiet. The cubs, thinking the field clear, came out of the water dripping wet. Then they waddled up close to the girls, and out of pure mischief shook themselves and sprinkled the dainty clean frocks with the shower from their frowsy hides. That sealed the fate of the cubs for the day, and when Balzer marched them off to their pen they looked so meek and innocent that one would have thought that they had been attending Bear Sunday School all their lives and were entirely lacking in all unwarrantable and facetious instincts. They went to bed supperless that evening, but had their revenge, for their yelps and whines kept the whole family awake most of the night. By the time the bears had been put to bed, darkness was near at hand, so supper dishes and gourds were washed and carried to the kitchen, and then the visitors said good night and left for home.